the skull.
That's Scully.
Scully.
He just burnt out. He burnt out. He's over here. Put some water on him.
For a minute there, I thought you were going to have Gillian Anderson up there. As you said,
Oh,
Scully.
different kind of Scully.
Yeah.
Poor Scully. Yeah, no, I gotta rewire him. He's lost his gusto. Hey guys, welcome to Vanishing Gates. I'm Jay, your host in the strange, the unexplained, the paranormal, and whatnot. And I'm joined today by Terry. How are you, dude?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the show.
No, thanks for being here, man. So, get closer to the mic, though. Get that
Okay.
Up there. Get that up there. Talking to that mic.
There
Make
we go.
love to that microphone.
Is that better?
That's much better.
All right. Sounds good.
I'm not sure how the folks at home are hearing you, but here we are.
All right.
So, let's talk a little bit about what drew you into the unexplained and the paranormal.
I think that's fair. First, I want to say hi to the Vanishing Gate audience. This is my first podcast ever, so I just wanted to say thank you, and hopefully we're going to have a great show. So to answer your question, Jay, it's really started off as interesting. If we fast forward a little bit in my life, my mother was a big fan of being anti Warren Commission. She did not believe that about the Kennedy assassination, and even to this day, she just thinks it's a bunch of garbage. And so, really, without me realizing it, by today's standards, I would have been indoctrinated to conspiracy theories. But then again, for those of you who are true researchers, think of what you found, that document that was found on that copier, and how the CIA invented that term. And now it's worked, because now, even if you get the conspiracy theorist label, and most people haven't seen this document, they're just absolutely paranoid, but it's true. So listeners, if you don't know about it, you can actually look this document up. It really existed, and this was an invention of the CIA to create boogeymen. Really, if you think about it, Jay, it's a term to shut down people who want to talk about the truth, about real things. And as we promised, we're not going to get into a political show.
We'll try not to rant too much.
Exactly. And so, Jay, my experience is really, it's taken me all my life to figure out that I'm an empath / medium / clairvoyant. And of course, I just turned 50 years old. Woo, I'm getting old. And but like a lot of psychics, I've been through a lot of my own experiences. You have to go through a lot of realizations, or a road that you have to travel through to really come to grips with who you really are, what your skills are, and learn to tell the world to fuck off, because you are who you are. And one of the great things about living in California is we've invented the fuck off Mecca, and of course, being in Humboldt County with our pot community, right? We know our cannabis people who are really just at it hardcore, and God love them, and good luck in their business and what they're going to do. So really, I started off, as I mentioned before, having contacts and visions as a kid in a crib. I was a kid. I had no idea. My parents wrote these off as just, oh, he's having nightmares. It's just monsters. Kids go through these things. But these types of, quote, dreams didn't stop. These occurrences still continued on through my life, whether I saw monsters or people or wizards or fairies or whatever they were. It was really common for me. I could look over and see my older brother asleep, and meanwhile it's like, oh, who's this old man that's standing next to me? Or who's this really scary looking woman, And you could, at the time in the 70s, I couldn't walk into kindergarten and go, excuse me, teacher, who's this scary looking woman, So it began, Jay, a lifetime. It's a lifetime journey, and it's really true that if you really seek, if you really look internally, and you get honest with yourself, it helps you not only accept yourself, but realize that all of us can do this, and all of us can share this interconnected, if you will, I like to call it the human internet. In metaphysical terms, I like to call it the collective. I like to change the word to even much broader. I call it the kind of a galactic internet. We're all interconnected to everything, stars, planets, everything. And most people think, well, shoot, I can run my foot into the door and I'm not connected to the door to my house. And on one level, that's true. But what we're looking at is how we look at reality, and how we think the microphone is here, how we look at the table, and how we think it's solid. So I began in school, being that classic outcast. I was, socially awkward at the time. And I was more of an internal kind of a guy than I was somebody who was the life of the party. That was my older brothers and sisters at the time. And but I was fascinated because in grade school I was reading books on ghosts. I was reading books on spirits. I remember looking at a spell book. I remember, and again, listeners, for those of you who are old enough, doing this stuff in the late 70s and early 80s. This was a big no-no. And for those of you who remember events in the media at the time, there was a big scare in the 80s about
the Satan scare.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And pop culture echoed that, whether it was TV or the movies. And of course, everybody still has the classic Exorcist vision in their mind. and so it's just one of those things. As a kid, you just kind of learn to keep to yourself. And I even started going to see the school shrink at the time, thinking, all these kids are out here partying and, getting to know really good girls and, dating and having all this fun. And meanwhile, here I am reading about lasers and space and these creatures. We talked about Frankenstein and Dracula. And I was just fascinated by all this stuff. I couldn't get enough of it because it's something I seem to understand really, really well compared to somebody going, hey, look, Van Halen's playing tonight. I would have loved to have gone to that show, knowing who they are right now in 2019. Look at the effect that David Lee Roth had on girls. It was awesome, And
that guy's a goob.
I know. Hey, look at the way he looks today. Could you imagine if you could play guitar like Eddie Van Halen?
Have you seen Eddie Van Halen lately? He cut his hair. He doesn't look like Eddie Van Halen.
Yeah, I know. Talk about another show about clones, and so for the listeners out there at Vanishing Gates, I'm hoping you've had some similar experiences you wouldn't mind sharing, because a lot of us have psychic ability. A lot of us have had unusual experiences, but we're all scared to get locked up or put on some kind of antipsychotic medication. And then we kind of learn, well, wait a minute, we do this naturally. And there's all sorts of history that points to human beings just do this. They're not meant to be tied to their smartphone to send a text to the other side of the world. They can learn that they can just sit there and really communicate with the loved one without the help of any kind of tech. And so part of coming out and talking to your listeners tonight is really encouraging you to share those experiences, especially if you've had anything that seems unusual or unusual, because we're going to talk about the boogeyman. So sometimes, outside the tweakers, of course, we meet every day here. That's a form of boogeyman. Yeah. But, we do meet unusual things in the woods or in the mountains or sometimes in the ocean. And those are experiences people need to talk about, and they should. They should feel comfortable about it. Because, if people can go on and on about, LGBT plus, there's so many letters there. If they can talk about that, if they can talk about whether they support a president or not, they should certainly be here to be able to talk about their paranormal experiences. And really, in my paranormal course that I'm working on right now, even that's sort of a misnomer of a word. It's a way of really communicating with another form of reality that our five senses don't really look at. Because I may see Jay in front of me, but behind him, could be a deceased dude. And the deceased dude isn't going to be coming here to kidnap him or anything, but that dude's just floating around without a body. He just doesn't have a spacesuit. And it's not unusual at all. It's just this world we live in, this way we're kind of shut down and said, okay, you're in this box. Don't believe this. Look at what the media tells you. Look at what your neighbors tell you or whoever you work with. That's what you believe in. Don't ever question it. And don't talk about this crazy, what do you mean you can see these things in your sleep? Or what do you mean boogeyman? There's no such thing as vampires. That's all crazy talk, And so I really hope as I catch up on Vanishing Gates episodes that I can see the feedback from listeners and hear about their experiences, because it's okay. This is a very normal part of who you are as being a human being, man, woman, or even kids. And I would encourage parents, dads, get out there, talk to your kids, talk to your son, teach him that it's not unmasculine. Some of the most masculine men were rulers, and they were visionaries. They were able to see into the future. And again, that's something I would have to come back on another show and give you fact A and fact B and fact C. And I'd love to do that. But right now we're just trying to be organic on these topics.
I know you're not used to this. This is a new thing for you. So it's kind of fun to watch these things unveil, which is kind of my weird, like, I'm a big people person and big into psychology and stuff. So anytime I have a chance to let someone just let loose in a situation where they're uncomfortable, I kind of see what kind of person they are, and I like it. So, calm, relax, huzzah. But no, you're doing fine.
Okay.
But so there's a lot going on. You're giving a lot of information out there. Let's reel it in for a minute, make a little ball, and think about the idea of a boogeyman. Do you know where this idea comes from of a boogeyman? It's ancient. It's old.
It's very old, and it depends on what set of eyes, and who and what you call your god or gods.
Mm-hmm.
It's very ancient. Arguably, for those of you who are ancient astronaut theorists, it could be argued that this could be, the Enochians coming down, and with their advanced technology, and because of where we were at as human beings at the time, that could be seen as a god or gods or a possible boogeyman, because these gods, according to those theories, weren't human, and so, and if you're living in the Amazon and you haven't had this kind of contact before, except in the priesthood. It would be easy to be scared, and it would be easy to go, wow, what's that, and run, because that's a human reaction, fight or flight, or as we call it in Eureka, fuck it and run, and so it's just one of those things to where the boogeyman can, I think, as I was telling you earlier, is even though it's much easier to put it out there as fiction or to make a Hollywood script out of it, but based on real people, real situations. For example, Jack the Ripper was a real dude. Charlie Manson, more modern, was a real dude. These are some extreme examples, but those could be considered boogeymen. We could even potentially argue that some of these folks that do these terrible, massive mass shootings today could be seen as a form of a boogeyman, because
Absolutely.
they're coming in and just doing awful things. I don't have to tell the listeners. You see it or you hear about it, and so that's something I would love to see an end to. Just the world shouldn't be like this at all. Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, humans, we human all over the place. One thing we do is we spread human all over the place. that's what we do.
It almost sounds like you're spreading fertilizer there, Jay.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm journalisting all over the place with this. I could work for CNN right now, except I'm telling the truth. Oh, sorry.
I liked it when they, way back in the day, used to call it the Clinton News Network.
Chicken noodle news.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyhow, sorry, guys. Not to be too political, but give me a break. Give me 2 breaks. Give me 4 breaks. Hi, Paul Stevens in chat. Nice to see you, buddy. So,
yeah, hey, Paul. Everybody, you got to meet this guy. If you haven't talked to him, Paul is so much fun to talk to, and he's like one of the most down-to-earth guys in the world.
He's dope, as they say. Dope AF, I think, is the current nomenclature one might use. I'm a little old for that. But so, the boogeyman, though, this idea of the boogeyman or a boogeyman, this is a deep-seated thing. You brought up fight or flight. See, me, I don't have a flight response. And there's not just fight or flight. There's fight, flight, and freeze when it comes to self-preservation. A lot of people, they think they're flying. They're flying away from this. But what we're doing is freezing and becoming prey. The people that fight, it's a little different. I like to find my problems and headbutt them into submission. I'm kind of old-fashioned that way. Hence my ridiculous hairline that has not changed since I was 10. And so
I was kind of wondering if you had like a plate in your head or something.
It's the same.
Yeah.
No, I've always had a 10 head, man. This is not a receding hairline. It's never changed. It's always been this way. I do have eyebrows too. God damn it.
He might have a WWE career here we don't know about.
No. I've done martial arts my whole life, but never professional wrestling. Although The Rock is an actor.
Yeah, I mean, if he can make all that money moving his eyebrows, I mean, look at that.
Does Dwayne Johnson have a podcast?
He's got a lot of money. Maybe he'll give us a loan or something,
Yeah. Give me a high five. That's all I need. Picture on the wall and a high five with The Rock. But fight, flight, and freeze. This is a real thing because a lot of people, you get scared. Now, look. There's a misconception about courage. Okay, courage is not the lack of fear. Courage is an appropriate reaction to fear. Mm-hmm. That's when you act courageously when you're mortified. The guys that run towards gunfire, that run into a burning building to save people, the firefighters, the cops, the soldiers, that's what they have imbued inside of them. And it takes some time to learn that sometimes, but some people have it naturally. But when it comes to the boogeyman, it's a little different because those of us that run at gunfire still once in a while pull our blankets over our eyes. Why is a blanket such a safe thing? Because you're calm, you're neutral. It's kind of like that...
And many of us are taught, if you think of as kids, right? Maybe this might not be true for everybody, but a lot of times as little kids, mom, dad, or both could teach us that the bed is supposed to be a safe place. And so for some of us, we were taught we can take that blanket and pull it over our heads if we're 4 or 5 or 6 years old, and the monster will go away.
I think part of it, because it's opposite for me. My dad was like, hey, you want to learn to swim? I'm going to toss you off a boat in a lake. Have fun.
Gee, Dad, how about some lessons at the Y or something?
No, we didn't have that. Oregon, off the boat. See you at shore, son. I can't swim. Gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. Oh,
never mind if there were piranha or something.
Probably not in Oregon, but there might have been. You never know. I was splashing enough, I would have been eaten. But then also in the woods, camping. Hey, we're going to go camping. I wander off by myself. Cougar Reservoir area, the Three Sisters Mountains. Cougar Reservoir. And I wander off. My dad, my brother Jesse, and I.
When you say Three Sisters, that makes me think of another kind of show completely.
I'm not going to invite RuPaul on. I don't care how much you beg me. Anyway, so I wandered off in the woods for a night. Didn't realize Dad was probably watching me the entire time. Saying, hey, just do this and do this. Told me this my whole life. I was a Cub Scout and stuff. Learned this stuff. Dad was a Ranger. His dad was a CAA guy. So, I mean, I had some kind of inclination of how to live in the woods. So I meander off, and I'm out there. I slept out under a tree for that night. It was cold. Gathered stuff to keep myself off the ground, and
that sounds like living on the west side of Eureka. It's cold. You're almost living out in the woods, except there's concrete.
So ready to have been here again.
Yeah.
And I was born in Arcata.
Well, you got the bottoms out there for that.
Oh yeah. It's so foggy. Yeah. But we were in the woods in Oregon. It was kind of nice actually. You could see the stars, lots of trees. I remember vaguely thinking I was being stalked by something. Might have been a mountain lion. Might have been my dad watching me. And I think he probably left my brother Jesse to stay in the tent by himself because he's kind of a throwaway brother, It's like the middle child.
He gets to sit there and hold the fort down. Maybe the boogeyman has a teammate.
That kid was too skinny to hold the fort down, but he did eat worms. I remember that.
They kind of taste like dirt.
He actually once took his shoes and grabbed a bunch of pill bugs. Mm-hmm. Sow bugs, and filled our bathroom sink with them. It took 6 or 7 trips before my mom and dad were like, what are you doing? And he's like, I found these. And his shoes full of freaking sow bugs. And then he pointed to the bathroom, and the sink was full of freaking sow bugs.
Didn't he ever, connect, didn't he do something like collect army guys or something more like what
No.
like a boy would do.
No,
No?
I mean, I don't know how much more of a boy you can be than collect bugs, living bugs, and put them in your bathroom sink. That's the most boyish thing I can think of, to be honest. But
Good point.
to roll back to where we rabbit trailed like crazy on that one. To roll back, though, to the idea of the boogeyman and the pulling your blankets up over your head and stuff. I wonder if there's something deep-seated in all of us. There's something bad there that lurks around. You hear about sleep paralysis and stuff, and people that have, that transition from the hypnagogic and hypnopompic stages, and suddenly you're abducted by aliens in your head, or you're really abducted by aliens, or you're dragged down to hell while you're asleep, or people have heart attacks that see visions of hell or the inferno or something else. So maybe there's something firing in our brains that goes that direction. I mean, we look at Slender Man in more recent pop culture, and yeah, the guy that came up with the idea of Slender Man has been open about regretting it because of those girls that stabbed their friend.
Right.
But did he come up with the idea? Is that really a thing he came up with, or is it something that he repeated? One thing I've learned about people in general, we're pretty creative, but we regurgitate our feelings and our thoughts over and over and over. We look back at the Baghdad battery, for instance. We didn't think, electricity wasn't well known back then. Way, way back. You know what the Baghdad battery is, right? It's a clay pot with the alkaline and the pipe in it.
Right.
And as far as people can tell, historically, archaeologically, it was for, gold plating things. That's as far as we know. That's the guess from archaeologists. We don't know that for sure.
Right.
You look at how the pyramids are built, and there's a really good study that says the pits next to the pyramids, the big long drag lines, were actually used for balloons to float the limestone or whatever it was up onto.
Right.
So someone actually wrote a really good book about that, and a really good piece, and I can't remember who it was or what it was. Dad Nabbit. It was Darkness Radio. Dave Schrader was where I heard it, talking about that. And I read the book, and I can't remember what the hell it was. My bad. Sorry, folks.
And then again, if we start splitting hairs, everybody in the audience, if you've already done your research, Jay's right. But there's a perspective by what they call a pyramidologist and then what they call an Egyptologist. And you could put these two experts in a room on just what you just said, and they could totally disagree. And that would be totally another show in itself.
It's
but
like
I
two
hear you.
economists in the 80s talking at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a deficit. It's not the deficit.
Voodoo economics and Reaganomics.
It's the same thing, guys. Like, look, we don't know everything, and that's a big deal. And what happens is, I think, we get the wrong impression about 99% of what's going on around us. So, as my analogy with the pyramids and whatnot, with the boogeyman, how do we know, it's a better way to say it, that something there isn't, something that's not there is there? It's hard to wrap my head around it, because I'm trying to give life to something that doesn't exist, and I'm not Stephen King and on cocaine. So, there's something deep and dwelling. So Stephen King, again, one of the greatest horror authors of all time, apparently, had a big coke problem, but he also sleeps with his light on.
Right. And remember, if we go back in history, Edgar Allan Poe had a drug problem too.
And no one knows actually how he died either. So
yeah.
No one knows why or how. We know he did.
Right. Otherwise, he'd be here on the show right now.
Probably not. At this age, I think he'd be like 165 years old or something like that.
At least, can you imagine what his Social Security check would look like? Pretty good.
Oh my goodness. Most people forget he's actually American of Irish descent.
Exactly.
Can you imagine Bram Stoker being here right now?
Yeah, I mean that's plenty. Yeah, and then, and talking about Stoker himself, that would be, like you were saying before we got on the air, that there would be so much material to prepare to really put out a good show for the audience on that. But yeah, Stoker would really, it would be fun to ask him a lot of different questions. But, when we look at this concept of a boogeyman, like I was telling you before, we could look at it in a couple different ways. of real existing boogeyman. You can come up and tap him on the shoulder, and and then of course he furiously comes back after you. Or as I mentioned in psychology, Carl Jung calls this the shadow. It's the darker side of ourselves. He tells us that we have a positive and which some people will call consciousness or awareness, and the shadow side is the unconscious, the things we need to bubble up into our awareness. It helps us to grow as people. So a lot of times the boogeyman for some people could be metaphorical or symbolic, and not necessarily literal. So really, part of tonight's show is that classic discussion of, well, is the boogeyman for some people a metaphor or symbol, or is he an actual physical manifestation? And I could see an argument for both, actually, because it just depends on how you decode or bring into your space the boogeyman. Whether you're out there in the Oregon woods with a brother holding the fort back in the tent, and your dad pushing you off into the water, or if it's something to where you go into your inner life, and we could call our boogeymen many things. Boogeymen could be in the form of addiction of many kinds. Boogeymen can be something as simple as, maybe we get really pissed off really easy and we blow up in traffic. It could come in many, many forms. But if we look at some of the, like you said, Slender Man, the Freddy Kruegers, the Michael Myers, the Jasons, those are arguments that they really do exist, and that Jung talks about that stuff that comes out of our shadow side. We are manifesting, we are creating, we are bringing it out, but we do have a chance to work with it, or we don't. And sometimes what we experience, at least from Jung's point of view, is when we choose not to work with it. And then that can go awry. It can have all sorts of consequences in our lives. And for many of us, it does. And it can be for days, weeks, or even a lifetime. And for those out in the audience that believe in multiple lives, you could have several past lives that are still affecting you today, right now, whether you choose to believe it or not. And so that's really something to consider. But I would say, if you look at real boogeyman cases, take a Jeffrey Dahmer. Unfortunately, I'm from Northern Ohio, so is Jeff, but not luckily the same town. Very fortunate for all of us, they caught Jeff. Jeff died, of course, in jail. Of course, we talked about Charlie. But these are just some figures that have made the media. We have to think about the type of boogeyman that we're not aware of, that doesn't make the newspapers, that doesn't get on Fox News. But it's just something that we might just run into it every night. Here's a theory for you, Jay. Since I don't know the audience well, for those of you that are local here in Humboldt County, California, there's times where, we all joke about, our tweaker population. Sometimes when those folks pop out at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, you could almost argue that, they're on meth or whatever they're taking. But it's almost as if they are possessed, that something is in the driver's seat, because they're so wrapped up in that addiction that dark side is operating, and it invites other beings into them. And even though I might see some dude, out there, and he's coming up to me and he's looking really scary, he's really scary for a reason, because his body is temporarily being taken over by something else.
Absolutely.
And
no question.
and so we have that locally here. And if you travel down to the Bay Area, you can still see that in the folks that are still running around defecating on the sidewalks, or over in Oakland, or wherever they're at. And that would be an example of a real life boogeyman, that people are just like, oh, this guy's coming up to me, and he's, he wants change, and he wants more than change. If he's a really dark dude, he wants more than just your money, or he wants more than just your car.
Well, yeah, it's deep and dark, and sometimes there's definitely a spiritual element to this. I don't know if I've told you about this, but I used to be a minister back in the day, and the craziest stuff I ever saw was in church. people that were coming to be helped. And they had all sorts of stuff going on.
Now, like, were you the dude that like laid hands and people threw off their crutches?
Yeah, none of that. I
Okay.
mean, yes and no. I saw miracles for sure, but miracles happen every day. I don't know why everybody makes a big, like, Benny Hinn kind of, like, I'll swing my jacket and fall over kind of
Or the
crap.
miracle that PG&E got some common sense and
Oh,
turned
no
on the
kidding.
electricity.
They didn't common sense. That was a whole different story. Hashtag recall Gavin Newsom. Anyway, all the politics of the show right there. Anyhow, but no, I saw people's face change. I saw the countenance, how their face moved, changed.
Exactly.
I saw them puke up black tar-like bile in church.
Absolutely.
And I saw the lack of change for the people that didn't want to be helped and the people that did want to be helped. I saw people totally change from addiction. What I see, look, I mean, you talk about people that do like things like ayahuasca and stuff to open their minds. If you ever look into the really deep, quote, spiritual movements of other cultures, there's always some kind of sedative. First of all, there's a good reason for that. I'm a compartmentalist. I actually have a mind palace. I'm big into that. Like, I break myself down into pieces, and mentally I have rooms in my brain and my psyche where I go and store things. Sometimes I really enjoy an inebriant. It's not to make me feel better, but it's to calm myself or numb myself. A lot of troops, they got hooked on drugs because they were going through so much stuff. There's a lot of experiments done with the military where the government be pumping guys full of stuff to help them get through things.
Right.
But now we got guys out there who, I mean, they're smoking methamphetamines. Like, they're choosing to do this. A lot of them. But where'd that come from? And we have pharmaceutical companies that are pumping stuff into the heroin to make the heroin worse than it was. Of all things, guys, guess what? Heroin wasn't the worst thing ever. Go figure. They pumped extra stuff into it to make it worse. And it's just a constant, disgusting battle. And so, yeah, definitely, when you start injecting yourself or fueling yourself with something mind-altering, you are definitely opening a door to something else. But it feels like it's a downhill slope, and some people were... I mean, look at the guy in Florida a few years back. The guy, they said he did bath salts. The dude ate some guy's face. He ate his face and attacked a cop before he got shot to death. Dude had never done drugs or barbiturates in his entire life. The most they could find to do was marijuana. First of all, I've never met someone stoned on weed that ever tried to hurt anybody.
Except maybe a cheeseburger.
Except maybe a cheeseburger.
Or
and
pizza.
then they could barely do that. They were like kissing it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, I'm devouring you violently. It was more like, I love you, cheeseburger and piece of pizza. You're my friend. I want to snuggle you. It wasn't like that. But this guy, who had no history of drug use, suddenly becomes a fucking zombie, an actual zombie. And that year, we had like 5 or 7 of those occurrences, not just in Florida, of all places, go figure, Florida, man, but all over the place. And we had one here locally in Klamath, where the dude, like, and his girlfriend boiled the dude. They cut him up because they were on, quote, mushrooms. I've never met anyone on mushrooms that tried to kill anybody either, by the way. So there's something going on. They called it bath salts then, and suddenly it was something else. You're opening doors to terrible things. And also, the idea that the government's not trying to pump you full of shit to fuck with you is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Exactly.
preposterous. Lyme disease. If you don't think Lyme disease was invented, or at least perpetrated by the government, you're in for a big surprise, folks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Big surprise. Look at New Jersey. Let me know how that works for you.
I mean, you just pick whatever city. Most of for those of you who've either been or from North Jersey, all you got to do is look at places like Hoboken, and when you're right there on the river, Jay's right on the money. I mean, that is like the mecca or ground zero of petrochemicals. So I'd even be afraid to get something from Purina there, because who knows if they're going to make your dog a mutant in 5 or 10 years just because you bought puppy chow for it. So nothing from Jersey. Even for those
Look at Schnooky. That's all you need to know.
or Bon Jovi, but that's
hey,
another
that's
thing.
his life, right? At least that guy opened a free restaurant.
Yeah, Free's good. Free's good. But, this idea of the boogeyman, you're right. When you talk about genuine cases, for those of you who remember the classic show, I think it's on Netflix. Back in the 70s, it was called Kolchak the Night
Oh, I
Stalker.
love Kolchak.
And
Carl Kolchak, one of
and
the
and of
best
course Chris
shows
Carter
ever.
borrowed some of that premise for the X-Files.
Yeah.
And
Didn't do it as well.
but exactly. And so but Darren McGavin really pulled off
hell
that
yes.
mix of skeptic and then when he really realized that he was running into a real vampire in the show, fear and common sense convinced him that he was really dealing with the real phenomenon.
He was a fighter too, though. That's the best thing about Kolchak. I still watch Kolchak, by the way. There's reruns. You can find them on Netflix. You can find them on, I think, Hulu and Amazon as well. One of the greatest paranormal TV shows ever made. The guy was a reporter and just got himself tangled up in all sorts of crazy crap. There's a Headless Horseman episode. There was like the Hawaiian Death Road episode. One of the best series ever.
And it was interesting with the timing of that show because that was kind of the forerunner of, we talked about that mass attention in the media of Satanism. But Kolchak, the Night Stalker, was just what an interesting fit from the release of The Exorcist to that time,
Yes.
And so so really, you're right. When you think of this idea of the boogeyman is many forms. The boogeyman is, from young, it is a part of ourself. It is one of those many faces, if you will. Then as you mentioned, those examples in Florida. There's a very tough book to read from the 80s about some cult connections in Nebraska. And it's a very hard book because this lawyer, for those of you who really have to have the facts, that really investigated this. It wasn't just a pedophile ring, but this disgusting sacrifice of kids and teenagers. And but if you want to look in terms of boogeymen, you could think about these, not just pointing the finger at this person who had this horrible appetite for children, but the masters, these non-humans, these gods. If some of you follow the works of David Icke, he would call them reptilians. That these people would report to. I forget the name of it, but Senator James DeCamp of Nebraska, and even though this book came out. It's really worth a read, and for those of you listeners that, like I said, it's very difficult to read, because there's some horrible graphic descriptions. But DeCamp tried to find justice for these children, and when you read about the people that were involved in these sex rings, they sound like some of the people that Jay was telling us about. That they looked like a human being on the outside, but something on the inside was definitely running them, and it just sort of depends, And I'm really hoping that the average listener of Vanishing Gates is an open-minded man or woman that will consider the evidence instead of saying, "Well, look, it's a computer mouse. It's in my hand. But wait, is it a real computer mouse?" And there's a ton of people in the world that are like that. It's like some of my favorites from this week's power outage is people who drove around the McDonald's in my neighborhood thinking there was going to be power and they could buy a hamburger. And there's a lot of people out there in the world like that. It just scares the hell out of me, Jay.
It was a nightmarish kind of scenario, this power outage.
Yeah.
For sure. Like I'm kind of a prepper. Like I'm ready for things. And we're in Humboldt County. The power goes out all the fucking time.
Especially if you're in Trinidad. It's like you're lucky to have internet or anything.
Oh, yeah. But people are like, 5 days. If 5 days of power outage would have gone here, it would have been bad. Things would have ended darkly and horribly. That boogeyman would have come out if you have an internal boogeyman.
Oh, yeah.
That's the thing that would... I mean, people were fighting in the gas station before the power got turned the fuck off.
Yeah, I know. And then people, whether they meant it or not, making this joke about it's the purge. And, and while I understand the joke, people should stay tuned because they've got to realize that sometimes Hollywood will present something as fiction, And, so many years down the road, it can turn out to be true or
See,
somewhat true.
I think it's backwards, though, because I know what you're saying, and I think it's backwards.
Okay.
I find the exact opposite of things. Like, people talk about, okay, so violence in video games makes people violent. That's a load of horseshit. I don't believe that at all. I think
Okay.
that the violence in us produces video games. So it's like this.
Mm-hmm.
The separation between violence in video games and pornography, there's a big difference. When you see violence on screen versus pornography on screen, which one do you think is going to be the more mind-setting, the mind-melding? It's not going to be the violent one.
Well, right, because if you go with, and what I'm going to talk about here is right down the middle, average psychology. If you walk into Humboldt State or wherever and you say, hey, I'm going to study psychology and get a degree in it, the current motivation believed in psychology is sex.
Well, I mean, that's the human propaganda. We do that. We are existing to make more humans.
Right.
Whereas violence gets rid of humans.
Right.
It's the antithesis of one. So it's like the idea, the adage, violent, evil people are stopped by peaceful men skilled at violence.
Mm-hmm.
That idea. It's the same thing. But sex brings about more humans. Again, that's kind of what we're supposed to do. And if we are to actually take a step back and realize we're part of this natural world, humans, because this is a problem I think most humans have right now. A lot of us don't realize we're part of this natural world. All the crap we've built, all the garbage, all the crap we've done, we're still part of this world naturally.
That's right.
And we forget that. We think that, we need to do this and that. First of all, if you're so howdy and high-minded, you think you're going to destroy the world by what you're doing? Good luck. Like, dude, there are Nazi villages in Argentina that have already been overgrown. Nazi villages. 1940s, 1950s. Big villages, been overgrown. Nazis from Germany went there, built villages. It's been overgrown. And the jungle's taken over. The world took over. How do we fucking get this mindset that we're that good at things? We're not. We're okay at things.
I think, just to add on to what you're saying, I think for many of us, it's just easier to escape into our own little make-believe world instead of really just looking out what's going on.
I mean, like, as a kid myself, like, okay, guys, at my age, I'm almost 40, guys. According
break
to my
out the black
age,
balloons.
Good Lord, no birthdays. According to my age, the Earth has already killed me 5 times. 5 times at my age. The hole in the ozone layer, and then all of the poles melted already, and then blah, 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 because global warming's not fucking real. We don't... the Earth changes. Climate is a thing that happens. Climate change happens. We don't control it. Fuck, do you guys know what CO2 is? It's a coolant.
Right.
The cows aren't fucking killing the atmosphere. You know what trees breathe? CO2. Fucking morons.
Exactly, Jay.
Pardon my French.
I would say,
Angry
I think it'd be fun to put a bumper sticker out that says, climate change : the military controlling the weather since the 1930s. You can still see them spraying stuff over in the sky, and it's really fun to get, because if you think about it, I'm like a lot of people. I want clean air and clean water. There's nothing wrong with that.
Fuck, who doesn't?
Right. But if you think about, well, what's the new religion? The new religion right now is the environment.
It's not new. It's been since the 80s at least.
Oh, even longer. And so this poor kid Greta.
No, I'm upset about this because, first of all, people are exploiting this girl who clearly has Down syndrome or something like that. First of all, she's like Scandinavian, and her parents clearly didn't care about her enough to not use her as an exploitive tool. And in America, if you do that, you should go to prison. And this poor girl has been raised her entire life to think the entire world's going to end before she's fucking 2 years from now. It's disgusting.
And an interesting thing about this is that the European press believes, after a lot of digging, that Greta and her parents and some things tied back to Sweden go back to the Club of Rome. And, of course, the Club of Rome launched this initiative even before you and I were born.
Oh, man.
Of global control by environment. And so now we have this form of how dare you, is the catchphrase, but it's like, how dare you think for yourself? How dare you question the official line of the media? How dare you question the line of the so-called political class? Because, in my opinion, Jay, you want to talk about boogeymen. The political class is the boogeyman,
yeah,
and
no
then there's
shit.
the elite. There's two systems,
Absolutely.
If you and I get in trouble with the law, there's one system. But if you're the elite, there's another
But if
system.
you're Hillary Clinton, you can do whatever you want and kill a bunch of people and you're fine.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So
Just
those would
saying.
be other forms of boogeymen, but are very real. And the scary thing is, I feel for our fellow countrymen and women that don't do their homework. You mentioned some very simple facts about people. And a couple years ago, Hollywood did a Tom Cruise movie featuring the life of Barry Seal. And I watched the movie, and I tried to keep my expectations low. And Hollywood did what it normally did. It really showed a very sanitized version of what Seal knew about the Clintons and why he had to go. And that movie could have been very explosive, but the Clintons are still here, and people who have that type, I call them front people, even though they're politicians and they're seen as very powerful. There's people behind them propping them up, making us believe that they're really these really big important people. But again, listeners, you have to do your own research and question it for yourselves. And these would be forms of boogeymen in women.
Absolutely. So for those of you who aren't in America listening, this is kind of how we digress on politics, much like a couple Irish fellas yelling about the landlord whilst we're drinking at the pub. But here's the thing. We got people in office in America. This is American folks again. Let's reel it back to America for those of you here. We got people that are lifelong politicians that never had an actual job, like Bernie fucking Sanders. The guy has never had a job aside from writing about two kids having sex together. The guy is a piece of crap. Sorry. Don't mean to burst your bubble. The guy's creepy. Then you got guys like freaking, let's go on both sides of the fence. We got Mitt Romney. Oh, that fella.
Hey, I thought we weren't going to get political.
Oh, we're going both sides. I hit Bernie,
Okay.
I'm hitting Mitt now.
I mean, I don't mind.
I got to go back and forth because this is America where God
Okay.
still pays attention, right?
And we have to encourage Jay to use free speech while it's still around.
Yeah, for the last 10 or 15 minutes before I have to shoot people to survive. All right?
And
No.
the courtesy
Mitt
of
Romney
PG&E.
of all damned people. That guy, first of all, great family, Mormon family. Nothing against the Mormons. The guy's an asshole. He's a fraud. Mitt, you're an asshole. No one likes you. Paul Ryan, fuck you. Mitch McConnell, eat a bag of dicks.
Jay, I wish
The
you would
hell do
just
you
come
think
out
you
and tell
are?
us what you really think.
Good
you know?
grief, I can't do that. If I did that,
It's like,
bad.
ladies and gentlemen, he's like, this is his shy side or
It
something.
could be really bad if I did that. 'Cause I'm already on a government watch list, I hope. It's my theory. If you're not on the government watch list, you should be ashamed of yourself.
Well, according to Edward Snowden, I think we're all on a government watch list.
Oh, good Lord.
Especially this
Edward
program.
Snowden.
So
First
if we
of all,
are, I want to say
Snowden
hi
is
to...
not a hero, by the way. He's a scumbag. I'm glad he did it, but you're still a traitor.
Okay.
Well, think about it, man. He sold our secrets to another government. Why didn't you tell everybody else? Tell us, asshole. That's the change up. Here's Edward Snowden. Oh, I'm going to make a bunch of money by selling our secrets to China. Or, Snowden the hero, I'm going to tell everyone in America about what's going wrong. That would have been the way to go. Guess what? Execution. Boom. You should die.
Well,
a law.
I would guess if Edward I would guess if Edward comes home, that's probably what will eventually happen to him.
Yeah, he won't.
Because as he said on
Nah.
Twitter a few weeks ago, he believes, there might come a time he gets suicided. Again, ladies and gentlemen.
What did he have against Hillary Clinton?
Yeah, right, exactly. But his former employers have a way of making people disappear.
Yeah, they're not that good at it.
Oh well.
I mean, Epstein, though. They're not that good at it now. It's getting kind of sloppy.
Yeah, that's
Look
true.
at Epstein.
That's true.
Suicided himself in a cell with paper clothes and paper sheets and couldn't possibly do it. And the footage turned off accidentally. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a thing. All right. We're going to ignore all those trips to fucking Lolita Island on the Lily Express that Bill Clinton was on. Yep, we're just going to ignore that.
And the Prince. You forgot
Oh,
about
Prince
UK
Adam,
royalty.
or
Yes.
whatever
Or
it is.
Andrew.
Who the fuck cares? It's the UK. I haven't given a fuck about the British in 1776.
Well, and for everybody over in Europe or Scandinavia.
No, we still love you.
Yeah, we do. You guys are cool. I mean, you do make the pub life a little bit more interesting, because think about it. In America, we just love to go to the bar and drink and get shit faced. At least in the UK, they kind of make it they make it a family thing. It's kind of interesting.
They drink with their kids.
They drink with their kids.
Really?
Yeah.
That happens there.
Yeah, the British are like that. So if we have any folks in the UK that want to comment, let us know, because hey, we're just two guys sitting up here in the Emerald Triangle, and maybe we're both wrong.
Send us your best pictures of you and your kids taking shots together at the pub, eating crisps. I got in trouble. It was St. Patty's Day. I got in almost a fight. Didn't get in trouble. Almost a fight. There's a guy from I want to say Derby or something like that, and we were at a local bar here. St. Patty's Day. I was wearing a kilt of all things because I still wear a kilt, and fuck off if you don't like it.
Hey,
and,
at least it's breezy,
And it felt good. So we were drinking, and the guy's in his Irish accent, which I've known quite a few Irishmen from Ireland that are pretty cool dudes, and this guy was kind of a cunt. And he starts bitching about how bad America is. And I'm sitting in the bar next to him, hey, buddy. So what? I'm like, my grandmother's Gallagher's. Oh, yeah? Yeah. From, I guess, Donegal. There's no Gallagher's in Donegal, this fucker says. And I'm like, oh, well, my family came from there, and they're Gallagher's, so... And he starts to argue with me more. I'm like, he's like, you know what's wrong with this country? It sucks. I'm like, oh, cool. You know my family left Ireland? I said, why? I'm like, because it fucking sucked. And he reared his fist back. I'm like, hey, let me buy you a shot. What are you drinking, Jameson or Tullamore? Son of a bitch wanted Jameson. Fight averted. It was that fucking simple. We are some fucking foolhardy people as humans. We don't do so well. In general, we come up with some crazy stuff. Like, we are capable of doing great things, but so are fucking monkeys. There are cats that are capable of doing great things. Oh, there's a question. I was like this show. Oh, boredom. To answer your question, boredom. Sorry.
And Sarah, it is my first time on here, but we will get back to the boogeyman stuff. It is interesting stuff, so we will.
We'll go back to non-paranormal. Sorry.
We can do that. It's not. Thanks, Sarah. We appreciate the feedback.
We do.
So
okay. Back to the boogeyman, though.
Boogeyman. Okay.
Now we're talking crap about the Irish and whatnot because we're tired. It's late. Anyhow, so the boogeyman, though, the idea of the boogeyman, it's not a new idea. Yeah, it comes from all these different dark recesses of the human mind. But it might go before that. Think about the predators. If you were living in a cave, like if you were back in, you know what Göbekli Tepe is?
No, I don't.
As far as we know, Göbekli Tepe is like the oldest human gathering to build a place and do as far as we know. To move from hunting and gathering to raising cattle and doing farms. So maybe it comes from there, the lion in the savannah chasing you down. That kind of thing. Maybe it's the wolves in the woods coming to get you. Maybe that's where the boogeyman comes from. Or maybe it does just come from us being creepy. I mean, you think about the Wendigo. You know about the Wendigo.
Yes,
right?
I do.
So that idea. I mean, you think about even in Northern Europe, they had the idea that the guy would put the cloak on, the skin, and turn into, a wolf, the wolf man, or the Yanaglancha, as some would say,
or the Chupacabra in Mexico.
Chupacabra.
Yeah.
So something like that. Maybe it's all tied together. Maybe all this darkness actually just comes from us.
And, I would tend to think so, because we do make our own reality. That's one of the things I'm studying in my master's program is I am majoring in consciousness. And And I do talk about that all the time in my studies, even if my professors and fellow students don't care to
Or
talk
ignored by it.
about consciousness. And it's kind of like being the rogue. Um, but these are things that splinter off, that that can grow and become part of what we think is real. And I think you're really onto something, because it's they do exist. The problem is, again, for Sarah and some of the other listeners, the problem is when we investigate things and we want to prove it, we look at stuff and we say, well, there has to be physical evidence. The police will come back during the case and say, well, we apply good old forensics and that's how we get Charlie Manson. Well, that's sort of very one-dimensional in the one sense, because we have to start looking at spiritual, if you will, fingerprints, footprints, other evidence that's left behind, that you can't just use the brush and call in the CSI team and go, aha, Johnny did it next door with the candlestick. It's, that stuff's kind of over, because as you mentioned, these could be very unique life forms. They could be extraterrestrial. They could be extra dimensional. And the evidence is there. Whether it's a show like Ancient Aliens pitching an explanation, or a million other books, we'd have to flood it up on your feed so people could see all these sources that would support your position, and talk about, well, like Bigfoot. Bigfoot to me is a very realistic animal, or you could even argue even partly human.
See, I never actually believed in the idea of Bigfoot until recently. I never even accepted the idea that Bigfoot could be real, because I've camped and hunted in the woods out here for a long time. And then what changed my mind, of all things, sometimes you meet people who are so unopen-minded.
Mm-hmm.
Like their mind is closed. This is fact, and that's it. You talk to them, and when they say something outlandish, when they say something that you would think is like, oh, this is outside of their normal, then you realize, oh, well, maybe I have to rethink my stat on this, where I stand. I have to go back and reconnect myself to reality, because this guy is saying something that doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this dude thinks that orange sherbet is terrible, but suddenly orange sherbet is the best ice cream ever.
Especially if you throw
Kinda
whipped cream
mindset.
and a cherry on it.
Good Lord. Okay, that's a little much. All right. Don't go too far there.
Or if we or Jay, or if we talk even still kind of local and not so much Humboldt, but if we go a little further in, we look at the creatures that are based in Mount Shasta, and it's very interesting, because if you go into the town of Reading and you start asking about these interplanetary beings that live in and under the Mount Shasta, the average guy or gal in Reading will say, God, he's a nut job. But when you start talking to some of our local tribes that have been around this area for hundreds of years, it's not a myth to them. It is an oral tradition that's passed along, just as the 67 film, of course, of Bigfoot is the most popular one that the media and most people tend to think of, but there's been a lot of other evidence and a lot of other sightings since then. And so when we look at other possible types of beings like a Bigfoot, there would be what these Native American tribes know as these beings or these creatures that live within the earth. And some believe that Mount Shasta is an interdimensional gateway of sorts, not only for there's a name, but and again to the audience, I'm not really great at pronouncing Native American terms, but it's not only does Mount Shasta contain these races of non-human creatures, but it's also a gateway, if you will. There's lots of reports of UFOs and extra-dimensional crafts, using that area to kind of jump, if you will. And and so that kind of, when you think about that in terms of a boogeyman, that average person on the street in Reading might say, well, yeah, that's just crazy talk. Where our Native American neighbors will say, no, this is an oral tradition of these beings and these sightings being around for a long time. And the funny thing is, you have to be in that area to find the writings, the testimony, the eyewitness accounts to these things. Even with us only being a couple hours away, it's very difficult to find it right here in town. Even for folks that are long-term Humboldt County residents, or if they have been here several generations, they may want to pass it off as an amusing ghost story. But again, when you talk to the right tribal members, and if you listen with an open mind, they'll pass this along to you. And again, it's a whole other show, because these sources could be brought in. Jay, my research is so bad. With me being a little bit older, I do both electronic research as well as just classic books.
Yeah, I like books.
And so I've got so many books, ladies and gentlemen, that I'm looking at buying into more bookshelves just to keep that information. So when we look at this in terms of, well, is this a boogeyman? Well, I don't think so. I would just look at this as, we're not alone. Not only we're not alone in the universe, but we're not alone on planet Earth either. And that these other life forms, whether it's Bigfoot, whether it's these other race of beings, the Chupacabras, the cloaked person you were talking about, are other life forms that have been here. And it's only us, if we decide to just dismiss it because we're afraid people will label us as crazy, or they won't like us and they'll shun away because it's too much outside of what we call, that word I hate so much, normal. Because again, ladies and gentlemen, maybe you agree, maybe you don't, but there's really no such thing as normal. There is your experience. There is how you perceive the moment. There is how you interpret things. And, Jay and I could be looking at Bigfoot, and he might be like, hey, that's Bigfoot. And I'd be like, hey, that's Milton that just fell out of the shanty over there on 3rd Street, And, and who knows, maybe Milton is the Bigfoot. We don't know. But in terms of this idea of a boogeyman, we would really have to look at it as being opened, and not just trying to get our concept of conventional wisdom just to fit it and go, well, this is easy to explain and write it off. And I think that's what it's important for listeners to keep listening and keep questioning and commenting, because we have to keep each other in check. We have to really question. We have to keep our critical thinking going, even if we're not always right. But, the great philosophers, Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, talked about how it's important, to think, therefore I am. And so if I want to think there is a boogeyman, based on that ancient philosophy, there's going to be. Or I could try to live in denial and say, well, there's no such thing. And, Terry's smoking dope, and there's no such thing as the boogeyman. And it's like, well, or there's no such thing as Bigfoot.
What do you think about the Slender Man thing? Like, how does that strike you?
Well, one of the things that's really common in the metaphysical community is that for people who are afraid to go public, that they're channelers, they'll often take their real channeling experience and present it as fiction. And so they'll present it as a fiction story, whether it's in a book, magazine, internet article.
And you're speaking as a person who has that particular precept or ability.
Right.
Or burden.
Yeah, right. Again, it's all on how you look at it. It could be a burden, or it could be a gift. So, and so when we look at this, right, if I'm channeling something that's true, take like we talked about Edgar Allan Poe a few minutes ago. Yeah, I mean, Poe was doing drugs, and that'll definitely mess your mind up. But perhaps Poe was really engaging with something that was truly real, in the sense of it is paranormal.
Well,
it was extra dimensional.
And all the writings about Atlantis and whatnot.
Well, and it's interesting you bring that up, is because as I'm starting to get towards the finishing up my master's, I'm for those, I don't know if most members on the program even really know who Edgar Casey is. Now, Jay, I think you know who he is.
Most do, yeah.
But I've had to explain to a number of people who he was and why he was so significant.
He's actually a highly religious person who would have thought all of this was ridiculous himself in
Right.
his normal life. And then when he'd go to sleep, he'd write out or auto-write these stories of Atlantis and whatnot.
And exactly. And so
Hence the Sleeping Prophet.
one of the things that I talk about at school is that we've entered a collective reality time with this rapid introduction of technology. Those of you who are listening who aren't very tech savvy, you know it as the cloud. Some of you may know it as artificial intelligence. We're repeating and we're building towards that that apex of what Casey talked about in those writings that destroyed Atlantis. And so what I want to do for one of my first books is talk about in terms of the 2020s and 2030s, as people are thinking about, oh, this cloud thing's a good thing. And again, you could find this in the press. About 2 weeks ago, Microsoft comes along and gives Elon Musk like $1 billion to launch his startup of a device that connects your mind to the internet. And unfortunately, it's not fiction, and it's but these are part of these devices that talk about that Atlantis, these residents became so technologically advanced that the technology eventually destroyed them. And or in our case, if you want to really go out on a limb, it will trap us into even a deeper alternate reality, a nonfiction. And I'll write a book about that and try to get it out there for folks. But that's part of what's fun about being here is going way out on the tree and hoping you don't fall off of it. And but that's a really great point you made.
See, yeah, it's interesting about like anytime someone brings up Atlantis, I'm just like, come on, come on. Look, we're not that great humans. We are very destructive. We're very good at being very destructive.
Mm-hmm.
Nuclear bombs and whatnot. Dropped a few. Made some messes. But what we do in the end is more important. How we recover from that, I think, is better. And I think that's like the counter argument to the boogeyman.
Well, because the nuclear bomb could be seen as one of the ultimate forms of the boogeyman.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely. I think that the evil in us is often counterweighted by the good in us, and I think most of us, I would venture and I would bet dimes to dollars that most of us, in general, if you were to take the good in humans, like the compassionate part, the soft part, we would outweigh that nuclear bomb by a lot.
Yeah.
So we get scared by the boogeyman, the dark part. Because some of us can interlace the boogeyman and find a good spot for that to work. Watch that John Wick movie, or the series John Wick. Watch that. The guy, his dog got killed.
I did see John Wick the 1 and most of number 2. I didn't see number 3.
Look, legitimate movie. I didn't see the third one. Legitimate movies, fun action, great times. Keanu Reeves, yeah, good for you.
And he's coming back as Neo once again.
Really? They're making more Matrix movies?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's you can find that. Just do a simple Google search.
Look, I know it's movies. Who cares?
Yeah.
But the fact is, like, okay, so power outage, we talked about a little bit. Now, those of you who aren't in California, it seemed like a huge deal in Northern California. People were freaked the fuck out because we got about 10 minutes of warning before they cut power out. I just started barbecuing for people. I was like, here's food. Well, I saw people losing their fucking minds, though.
I think on the next power outage, if we get some warning, I'm going to go get some tri-tip, and I'll be like, Jay, I'm coming over.
Oh, hell yeah. No, I got stuff. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
I got clean water and fire and ready to go.
That sounds good to me.
That's it, man. Like, it's on. But people freaked out. People were getting fights at gas stations over the fucking gas before the power got shut out. If we had gone the 5 days they thought it might have gone, this would be turmoil.
Uh-huh.
So there's a deep, dark, terrible part of us that may or may not be the boogeyman. But that said, there's something darker. Something that draws deeper, I think. Not us, but outside of us. The actual boogeyman. You don't believe me? Fall asleep on your back one day. Sleep on your back. Try to get some rest. You might not wake up.
You know, for any of you who've gone to graduate school, that sounds good because you just don't sleep at all. So, you know, you know, some risk, the boogeyman, some sleep. You know, it almost sounds pretty seductive.
You know what night terror is? Like sleep paralysis? You familiar with that?
Yeah, or if you've been working the third shift or graveyard for too long, yeah, that brings me night terrors.
Catches up with you real fast.
Yeah.
Now, I do believe there is an actual person that was the boogeyman. And not just one person, but multiple. I mean, you look at the original Santa Claus, it wasn't so great.
Mm-hmm.
You look at all these things. You look at...
You know, it could be argued that the original Santa Claus is modeled after Satan.
Yes and no. I mean, I wouldn't say Satan, but the OG Santa was based off that Turkish guy who, after the kids got cut up, he took the guy that did it and tortured him to death. A little different.
It is, but again, that'd be another thing. I should be writing some cliff notes on, again, just material to bring into you. And you know, I'm sitting here thinking, geez, I instead of bringing a car, I should just kind of load a van up with my books and say, all right, boys, bring it in. We got to bring all this stuff out on the air.
Well, I still celebrate Krampusnacht in my household, so I'm not a pagan. So,
so you know, and like I said, you know, for the listeners, it's really important to ask those questions and to really come to your own conclusions, because it's important for you to really figure out what is truth for you. And you know, Jay's just kind of just getting my feet wet with podcasting tonight, and to get more organized maybe in the future on other topics. But so this original boogeyman, you know, we could argue still exists, still out there, or in there.
We look at Jack the Ripper you brought up earlier. Mm-hmm. And we look at all the crazy stuff that goes on. There's something evil and dark that dwells in some people. Mm-hmm. There's no arguing that. Like, there's something demented. The question is there a person or a being that does this? Or is it something so deeply embedded in some of us that we can't fight it? I mean, how do you handle that? So when you find something terrible, like you got that idiot that shot up that church a couple of years ago. Yeah. How do you deal with that? He's evil. Absolute evil. That guy's scum from the bottom of the pond lining. Scum. Charles Manson, how do you deal with that? Manson didn't kill anybody himself, but fucking he made sure people died. So how do you handle that? Yeah, some of the what was it? There's not LDS, Latter-day Saints, but there's another version of the Mormon church there that the guy was just a send-off of it, and he created such a nightmare to be part of that. He basically fucked kids and was just a terrible piece of shit. Like, how do you...
that Jeffers guy, I think?
Yes, I think that's the right name.
Okay.
I didn't want to dedicate
he was like a polygamist or something like that. And
hey, first of all, I'm not against polygamy, mind you, but when you fuck kids, I fucking hate you. That's it.
You know, we wish Jay would just come out and tell us what he really thinks.
Yeah,
you know?
No, there's no question here. Yeah. You hurt kids, I want to hurt you back.
Yeah.
Problem solved. There's innocence. Don't fuck with it. We might be fucked up, but you don't fuck with innocence. That's it. That's simple.
Exactly.
But it gets dark. Like, there's some weird shit in our history as humans. Adolf Hitler, Saddam Hussein, Caligula, Constantine. It's just terrible things that happen. So, is the boogeyman us, or is there something that drives us? Is there some kind of embedded evil that might jump in? Is there a spiritual element that might pop in if you open the door. Like, I've heard people talk about Ouija boards and stuff, and be like, oh, well, I had a moment, a moment with the Ouija board that freaked me out, and suddenly I'm possessed. Like, first of all, I don't know. Couldn't tell you. But is there just a tantamount evil? Like, something that's just more overflowing and terrible than everything else? Or are humans just capable of evil enough to fill the brim? Because we look at what we do as humans, and we say, oh yeah, this is super evil. But then if you look at dolphins, they're pretty fucked up. Dolphins are terrible creatures.
Are they silly? Do you know of a dolphin serial killer that I don't know about?
No. Dolphins
okay.
actually are known to rape and pedophile and molest and gang rape their own species. Dolphins are actually terrible creatures.
Oh,
They're
so
some of the
much
worst
for the
creatures.
image of Flipper,
Yep. Faster, learning, not so good. No, dolphins are horrible creatures. Like, and they have one of the closest, they say, mind flows to us, which is preposterous. Because I think pigs are way closer. Physically, first of all, yes. Because you can change a human and pig heart out.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, I don't know about a human and dolphin heart. Pigs also orgasm for like 30 minutes.
Well, I guess there could be some advantages of being a pig.
Had on my druthers. But yeah, no, dolphins are horrible creatures, but no one is judging them. They're like, oh, we have to stop doing tuna stuff because dolphins are dying. Really?
Well, I mean, I would vote to not get political, but the military actually, training, dolphins and other sea creatures to go like retrieve torpedoes and things like that. I'd like to see that stop too.
I wouldn't.
If dolphins are, part of what you were saying, part of that, not so great behavior.
Yeah, no,
they
they're
have.
creepy.
Yeah,
They're creepy. Dolphins are creepy.
So what other sea creatures have this paranormal bouquet to them besides dolphins here? I mean, would an octopus be with its big tentacles and its massive jaws? Do they do something creepy like dolphins? Or
Actually, I think it's squids, but dolphins, octopuses, by the way. It's not octopi. Fuck
Yes.
off, I looked it up. It's octopuses.
we got to look at my grammar. Yeah.
Yeah, I looked it up. Octopuses. First of all, most scientists don't think that octopuses are actually part of this planet. They're alien.
Mm-hmm.
Squids are different.
Okay.
But there's some genes and stuff in octopuses that are not normal for Earth.
Yeah, and you're right. There are evidence, and there have been scientists around the world that support what you're saying. You're right.
Or I wouldn't have said it otherwise, Harry. What are you going for, buddy? That said, don't octopus on my drinks. But no, like the boogeyman, it's a crazy concept, but it's not. It's a real concept. It's something that is deep down and embedded in us. Maybe it's your abusive dad. Maybe it's your abusive mom or uncle. Maybe it's the octopuses in the ocean that you got scared of when you're in that whatever amusement park had an undersea thing with the open boat. Look, guys, the fact is, you're scared of something. We're all scared of something. We have to embrace the suck. Part of life and part of growing and being a capable citizen is taking the things that hurt or are frightening and melding that into something worthwhile. It's the craziest thing. You can live in the woods by yourself for 20 years and not meet another person, but suddenly you meet somebody and then you're a normal person again. That's happened. Google it. Don't Google it. Just fucking read a book. Good God. The fact is, like, we can, like, interact and be social after no human interaction. We're capable of weird things. We're basically a bunch of chimps with better clothes and haircuts. Actually, I think chimpanzees might have better haircuts than most of us. Justin Bieber. But some things you need to realize. There are some grounds, some moral grounds you need to follow. Don't murder people. That's number one. If you have a hard time with that, then you're probably the boogeyman. The second one is don't steal from people. That's really hard around here in Humboldt County because everyone's on methamphetamine.
Exactly.
I mean, look, care about each other. Like, fucking care about each other. How hard is that? To care about each other. It's weird. And also, if someone tries to encroach or something, tries to encroach, then kill them. Problem solved. That's part 2. Spoilers. Defend your kind. Anyhow.
Of course. Of course.
As for the boogeyman, though, his name is Ted, and he's really sensitive. But no, the boogeyman's real. The boogeyman's absolutely real. Are you serious? It's really a dude that lives under your bed and in your closet. He comes out at times.
I think the last time I checked under my bed, I just found dust bunnies.
Well, apparently it wasn't that portal opened up. You don't remember the real Ghostbusters cartoon? They got the big mouth, the horse head?
Yeah.
That guy gave me fucking so much pause for so long.
You know, and I think another thing that goes along with the boogeyman is we really didn't talk about things like some people call it astral projection. Some people call it traveling to the astral plane, and about beings that actually exist at that level. And of course, tonight's show is October the 12th, and 19 days until Halloween. And traditionally, in a lot of mediums and psychics believe, some astrologers, and depending upon who else you talk to in the metaphysical community, that the veil between the earth plane and the astral plane become thinner, and we can travel between these existences much easier. And some people believe November 1st is called All Saints' Day, and one of the reasons why it has that name is almost a form of repentance, or almost a form of protection of the horrible things that can and do happen every year on Halloween. A lot of us think of Halloween as, a lot of candy, costumes, drinking, maybe drunken sex, whatever. But there are far many other things that go on that we're either simply unaware of, or it's so terrible we don't want to believe it.
Samhain.
Yeah.
I'm always worried about Dulan.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we think of boogeymen, the astral plane is a source of its own. And again, depending upon who you talk to in terms of paranormal dreaming, some people say that we have that ability when we actually do fall asleep. We fall into REM sleep. We actually do travel. We do leave our bodies, and we travel to the astral plane, and that's the dream plane. For those of you who remember the classic Gary Wright song called Dreamweaver from the 70s, some people say that's a very tame version of that astral plane travel compared to what some of our experiences are when we wake up. And so some people will argue, well, that the boogeyman can come from those astral traveling or those astral communications. And here's what's something that'll bake the noodle for some people, is that you can have those astral communications or experiences while you're perfectly awake, and you're either at work or driving to get coffee or whatever you're doing. And some people say that's impossible, because how can you drive your car and be in communication with something that you can't touch or see or hear or feel? But that's the whole point, is that you communicate with these beings in a non-five sense way. And when we go to sleep, we simply turn down that ego. We turn that screening off temporarily, and that can open us up. And some of us are more talented at it than other people. And if you don't have the talent, that doesn't mean you're a terrible person. It just means that you haven't connected with it yet. Maybe you haven't learned how to develop it. And so when we think of that boogeyman, we can actually experience it on more than one level. We can have it in our waking state as well as our sleep, or sometimes in a state of meditation. And there's a lot of interesting writing out there that talks about it. There's eyewitnesses accounts to that too. So as we are at 2.5 weeks until Halloween, I would encourage listeners to just really look at what is your experience? Do you just are you a person that just doesn't dream at all, or do you notice something sort of maybe out of this in your peripheral vision? And some authors tell us if we sometimes see something very quickly in our peripheral vision, that it's it's not just a stray alley cat, it's not just a stray dog, but it's a being. It could be an astral being. Some will even say in the metaphysical community it could be your angel. And that's why we want to talk about everybody's experience. Is what is it for you? And the idea is not to judge it, but to understand, well, how is it different for Joe or Sally or whoever, and kind of compare notes. And sometimes people might be surprised how much their experiences have in common. And so when we look at those communications, we can once again look at it as a boogeyman experience, because there's some pretty awful things that exist astrally. Again, you picking on Hollywood because it's a common example. I think Marvel did a great job with the Doctor Strange movie. The character Jaramu, even though he's fiction, he could be easily seen as the boogeyman because of his very terrible intent, not just for the good doctor and everybody on planet Earth, but for multiple dimensions in the universe. And you could even argue that somebody could have channeled that and said, hey, it's a comic book and I'll just sell this as fiction, and here we are today. And so it's just, when you start to investigate it and when you really look at it, that's just one of those things that it could be for somebody. I'm not saying that's everybody's experience, but it's just something to consider as part of that phenomenon of the boogeyman. So, Jay, can you think of any time in your life to where you think that, you may have touched upon the astral plane?
Nope.
Okay, and that's and that's really not that's not a really uncommon answer.
I was being an asshole.
Yeah.
Look, my experience with the boogeyman all came from my head. Like, all that's internal. The problem is, when did he get so aggressive, and how did he scar the walls? Also jokes.
Probably because his agent didn't negotiate a great deal in Hollywood.
That motherfucker, he could have at least paid for the sheetrock.
Yeah, exactly. And probably a manicure.
A little bit of paint.
Yeah.
Get a better boogeyman job. No, as a person who has had night terrors and whatnot, or sleep paralysis, I'm more accustomed to the idea of what happens when you sleep on your back. Not so good. If you have a big neck, mine doesn't look big, guys. It's bigger than it looks. I know.
It kind of looks average. It doesn't look like it's...
I'm pretty average-necked looking guy.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's an Arnold Schwarzenegger neck or anything.
But I did do a lot of shrugs.
Okay. And that's good exercise. You kind of build up your shoulders. Maybe do some pull-ups or something.
My traps aren't bad, but when I lay on my back, not good for the staying alive. Okay. Apparently. So
what's happened to you laying on your back? I mean, what kind of experience have you had?
Well, when I lay on my back, I have night terrors.
Consistently? Every single time?
More, yeah. I stopped. As soon as it stopped, guess what? It stopped happening. So I would actually go through the entire alien abduction scenario.
Okay.
That was the thing that happened. Laying on my back.
Are you an abductee? No. Okay.
No. I actually do not believe that extraterrestrials are abducting people. I don't believe that at all.
Do you think it's the military abducting people and performing experiments on them?
No. I'm actually kind of a jerk when it comes to all this paranormal stuff, to be honest.
And yet you have a show.
I'm kind of an asshole. I know.
And yet you have a show on it.
That's why I have it.
That's
I'm
an
like the
interesting
biggest
spin.
skeptic ever. Like,
Okay, but that's
I'm
a great
hopeful
place
one.
to start.
Yeah, like I believe everyone's stories. I want to hear it. I don't believe it, but this is like. So basically, lay on my back, go to sleep. I start to asphyxiate, basically, and my body goes, hey, guess what? You're choking to death, and you're stressed. So suddenly, there's things grabbing you, so you have to wake up now. That's how sleep paralysis works. You're slipping from the hypnagogic to hypnopopic stage,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly, your brain, first of all, nightmares are a normal thing. And you're taking all the stress from your day. You have to have nightmares. You have to have dreams. That's how your brain heals itself from all the stress you have normally. So your subconscious and your conscious are bashing themselves together, and you're coming up with something in your brain. Your brain is formulating a cocktail of crazy and possibly not crazy. This is why you dream about that Karen girl, your secretary, who you would never think she's hot. Because all she does is tell you you don't staple your business cards correctly, which also doesn't make sense because I just made that up. But that's where it comes from. That whole load of horse shit comes from that. Your brain is ridiculously awesome. We are crazy brained. But our brain knows how to keep our bodies functioning. So what happens is you slip into a state where our bodies, which are... We run our bodies mostly off of fats, proteins, and hormones.
And caffeine.
Okay? Caffeine.
Yeah.
If we're lucky. Your brain also runs on caffeine. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And drugs. I mean,
Yeah.
methamphetamine. That's why meth addicts never get tired or stressed. I think that meth addicts will live forever because they've figured out you never have to stress ever again. You just do methamphetamines.
And
They'll
every
live
ex-cokehead
forever.
ever told me that when they were
Jesus.
doing coke, they had a
All they
great
want to do
sex
is-
life.
And they always want to do more coke.
Yeah, because they wanted to keep having a great sex life.
Fuck, I've never done coke.
Yeah. Yeah.
I should do coke.
You might have like 10 kids by then, you know. If you
No thanks. You know, I grew up in that Nancy Reagan don't do drugs era. Drugs are bad. It stuck with me. I just like some tobacco. Not cigarettes, they're gross, but cigars. A little bit of alcohol. About it. But when you're slipping into that hypnagogic, hypnotic stage, I don't remember which one's which. One's when you're slipping into deep sleep. One's when you're slipping into wake up state. Shit goes south. So no, I don't believe in alien abductions. I don't believe in any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So my experience, sleeping on my back, I'm starting to slip in the stage.
Now, would you believe that when we have a dream, even a night terror, especially a night terror, that dreams come to us as a service, that dreams come to us as a message. Dreams come to us talking about our health and our well-being.
Yes.
Okay. So...
I think I said that, though, the whole, your brain's trying to heal your body.
Right.
the
So
dream.
I'm just using different phrasing. And so maybe one of the things that come with night terrors, besides the boogeyman, is that it's really something that's trying to grab your attention about your health and your well-being. And one of the reasons why that you keep having night terrors is because this is trying to get through to you. You know, there's some type of a health issue coming up. And the reason why you keep having the night terror is because, you know, you've got something, you know, physically going on, you know. Maybe you're too stressed out. Maybe that dream could also be about, maybe it's something a little bit more involved, you know, maybe, maybe you're undiagnosed with diabetes or something, you know. These are just examples of what that night terror could be telling you over and over until you really dive into it on a conscious level. Because one of the advantages, because it isn't just Edgar Casey, but there are other people who've done other dream works that talk about how to work with those dreams. Um, because in the end, it's not really about if I sit here and interpret a dream, or if Dave over here, who's who's giving us some amusing comments,
Always.
um, uh, what he thinks about what's going on. It's not about any of us interpreting a dream, but at the end of the day, it's about what you think the dream means, even if it's a night terror. And because what's important is to respect what the dreamer is experiencing. And so even if the dreamer's experiencing a boogeyman or a night terror, that has meaning in it too, whether it's literal or symbolic. Again, it depends on the school of thought that you go to. And I led a dream interpretation group last semester with a group of Humboldt State students. And one of my students was experiencing night terrors. And when he started to explore this message, he had a very normal reaction. He got so far with it and he had to stop. It was too much for him. It didn't do good for my grades, but it made him, to protect his anonymity. He still talks to me sometimes, and I don't solicit him for, well, what did you dream last night? Because that group is finished, and he could be facing a very serious medical condition in his case. What I'm saying for you is, the night terrors every night are trying to tell you something.
Well, I don't have night terrors. I've had them.
Oh, you have had them. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So my problem comes, believe it or not, I have a bigger neck than it looks like. I have a big neck. It doesn't look like I have a big neck. I have a big neck.
Okay, we've established he has a big neck.
Yeah, it's not a big neck. It's a big neck for me. Anyway, I'm like at fault for sleep apnea because of the size of my neck and my trapezius muscles. Like, it causes a problem with my breathing chambers, my airways.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. So when I sleep on my back, I'm quite victim, possibly, of asphyxiation. When I sleep on my side, no problems. And that's what changed it up. Now, one thing I learned during all these night terrors or sleep paralysis moments I had was, if I sleep on my side, they don't happen anymore. At all. Like, not even kind of.
Mm-hmm.
When I sleep on my back, there's a real big chance that the gray aliens are coming in to touch my toes and implant things in me.
But see, let's just, for conventional sake in discussion, let's say that the gray aliens are symbolic. Let's stick with being skeptical.
They are symbolic, definitely.
Okay, but symbolic of a health problem.
Probably.
It isn't just the muscles and how they're encumbering your sleep, but something even more deeper that's trying to bubble up. That this dream's trying to tell you something. Hey, this is what's going on. You might want to look into it and see what it's all about.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have reported that once they reach a certain level with their dreams, sometimes they have to work with it a while. That dream will either stop or it changes. Yeah. And there's a guy that, when you have a chance, he's been teaching dream interpretation here in Northern California for over 40 years. His name's Jeremy Taylor. I love Jeremy's stuff.
So why didn't you invite him over already, Terry?
We should be like, hey, Jeremy, come on up to Eureka. We'll have a beer for you and have him come up and talk. And Jeremy holds groups, outside of the Bay Area, and so when I held my dream group, we kind of modeled it on his teachings, and so. Taylor's among some others, like Montague Allman is another one. Even though Allman is not with us anymore, Allman developed techniques all throughout the 20th century to address some of the things that you're talking about. So what I'm suggesting to you is these conventional methods, the skeptic in you might enjoy them, because the skeptic might be, aha, this is psychology that's actually saying, that's backing my position. If we pulled your skeptic out and we made him another dude, and let's say there's the dude Jay that wants to believe something totally different, and these two were to kind of argue with each other, or kind of work out what's going on. And so that boogeyman could be a health problem of some kind coming out symbolically. Another great guy you might want to read about, who's no longer with us, he died back in the 80s, Joseph Campbell. Joe was well known for his work on mythology. And I swear to God, this is true. For those of us who love the Star Wars franchise, George Lucas took a lot of the mythology of Joseph Campbell and incorporated it into what we know as the original Star Wars trilogy. And for those listeners out there, I've been training in the tarot cards on the Crawley deck. And what we call the Fool's Journey is represented that as well. And that feeds right into our dream life as well. So when we're able to look at that, because it's really something. I snore and I sleep with my mouth open too. I don't know if your wife wakes you up or not, but I've had girlfriends that I've been sleeping next to, and like, hey, hey, hey. And it's funny, my last girlfriend snored louder than I did. So, and I also learned she could not have Taco Bell before going to bed. So, yeah. So, but, I'll keep her safely anonymous. So, there's all sorts of messages that come to us all the time. The problem we all have as people, as being human, that fear you talked about is, it's really easy for us to react. It's really easy for, one of the very common things we all tend to do is rationalize. And I might say, oh, I sleep with my mouth open because I have sleep apnea too. And that could be. I could really truly have a medical condition. Or I could be looking at something's going on in my sleep every single night that I'm choosing to not recall. And that could be another form of the boogeyman. But we're talking more on a symbolic and a more metaphorical level than
Not so much
than Mike Myers, or Charlie Manson. Real life boogeyman, or as you talked about, some other less known things that are still really out there, that are still really happening, that we may not know in the public, that we may say, oh, that's so incredible that it's garbage. Well, that's a defense mechanism, that it's so horrific. That's a protection built in. It's trying to protect us from this thing that's so horrible that the first thing we do is go, no, this can't exist.
We put a block up.
Right. But that's human psychology.
Gacy, and we're just like, nope.
Yeah. And there is, ladies and gentlemen, we all know there's horrible things. There are such horrible things that even the press doesn't want to talk about them. The police won't want to talk about them because that's just, it's out there. And it's so beyond what they've been programmed to believe what's real.
Well, they're also humans too.
Yeah.
You think about, like, police officers are still just humans. They're just us.
Right. With a gun and badge and a bad attitude.
And what? Not all the time, but they're just dudes. They're just people like us. Like, fucking cops are just us. They want to go home to their family. Mm-hmm. 99.999% of the time, cops are just dudes that want to go home.
Right.
Or girls that want to go home to their family.
Right.
The fuck cares? Like soldiers. They want to go home. No one wants to pull the trigger. No one wants to pull the fucking trigger. That's the fucked up part. And we have a hard time realizing that. So the evil that comes up, it regurgitates through impromptu. It comes through like people not knowing. Like ignorance and self-hate and stuff. You get mad about yourself. You get mad, why didn't you do something? Well, suddenly, the cop or the soldier's a bad guy. You look at that criminal that's down the street from you, who might have murdered a couple kids. I didn't act. and you get pissed.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly you're the bad guy in your own head. It's not how it works, guys. You can't do that. You can't hate the soldier or the cop or yourself. You have to calm down. Do your best.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Impact your people around you as best as you can. That's it. You can't. You can't be angry about what you didn't do unless you're watching someone dying and you're just like, well, I gotta get Starbucks. Well, then you're kind of a piece of shit. But, like, honestly, you can't lay it on the fire department or the cops or the random line workers at PG&E here in Northern California. Most people just want to work and go home to their family, folks. Most of us actually care about each other. We don't show it. We've been told not to. Time to start showing it. It's fucking time to start caring about each other. Or the shit's gonna get worse. That's it. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I mean, that's part of this is having a philosophical moment.
That's why I give away the big candy bars on Halloween.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because all the kids will be like, hey, go to Jay's house. He's going to give you the 3-pound Hershey bar.
You know, dude, for 6 years, I've bought hundreds of dollars of candy.
Wow.
I have given away about $10 worth of candy in 6 years.
So we all know where to show up on that Thursday night at Jay's house.
Right?
Probably a ton of Snickers here or Hershey's bars.
I'll live stream from the front yard. Look, guys, the point is the boogeyman is really, it might be real. I'm not going to negate the fact the boogeyman's real. There is a boogeyman.
Yeah.
Not just us. No, I think there's an actual boogeyman.
Yeah. It's, there is, and, I'll give the boogeyman another name very generically in saying there is evil in the world.
It's called Satan.
Yeah, that's certainly that could be one very neat label for it.
It's a pretty clean, concise label. Honestly, though, boogeyman is the wrong term. Boogeymen should be plural.
Mm-hmm.
What bugged me is that a lot of people think that Satan can just be all over the place at one time. It is not omnipresent. He's not ever at one time. He's not capable of that. He's not God. So there has to be more than one.
Well, it. Well, take some of the religious experience and training you've had, right? So, since in the U.S. Since a lot of our culture, I'm not saying this is true for everybody, but since we tend to be a Judeo-Christian society, and again, I recognize that we have folks that practice Islam and Judaism and lots of other things because we do have freedom. Yeah, and we do practice freedom of religion in this country. We go. I'm just going to talk in terms of what some of my training. So if we go to the Book of Job, right? We bounce in the Book of Job. It's right there, and Satan's like, "Hey, I want to go screw up Job." But what does it tell you right in that book? Job goes to God and says, "Look, I need your permission to do this because I can't do it otherwise." And so of course, if you read,
well, Satan goes to God, not Job.
Well, right. I'm sorry. That's what I meant to say.
Job didn't want to be fucked with. He didn't want his
Right.
kids killed. He didn't want all of his cattle destroyed. And his
Right. and of course, the great thing is
the tempter had to go.
Yeah.
To God.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to say, I'm trying to use scripture to back your point. Is that he's not as powerful as we think, because right there in scripture, for those of you whether you're Protestant or Catholic, it's right there in that story that says the devil isn't as all powerful as we think. He's still got to go to God and say, "Hey, I want to mess with this guy named Job," and then God's like, "All right, you can do that."
In the New Testament too, it says the devil walks about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour.
Right.
Not devouring people. Walks about like a lion. Doesn't have teeth.
Yeah.
Does a shit.
Right.
the Jews have a much better perception of this. And this is also a Jewish high holiday this week, I think, still.
That was Yom Kippur last week.
Yeah, it's the month of high holidays.
Yeah, I
So
think you're right. I'd have to go look at the calendar.
Holidays,
Yeah, yeah.
My Jewish friends, I apologize if I'm wrong.
I think he's in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I know Yom Kippur happened last week. I think this is still part of the Jewish high holiday, so I apologize if I offend you. Love you. You know.
L'chaim.
Not. Yeah, Mazel Tov. I didn't break a glass. I wasn't looking at myself in the eyes. But, yeah. Yeah. There's more there. So, the thing is, I think that the Lord Almighty, if we're going to go that direction, might have had a better mindset than to just tell us this, and that, and the square is fit or problem solved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cut the red wire on a nuclear bomb. Cut the blue wire.
Yeah.
Does it matter when the collapse happens? I don't think so. I don't know, man. It's so irritating being in a state where no one cares about how I feel because I'm white and ginger.
Yeah, that's the times we're in. The Me Too movement has certainly made life complicated for a number of people.
You know what? Like, the fucked up part is everything. No question there.
But one of the reasons why I brought up the Book of Job to you is because, and as you were saying earlier, the devil has a team. You know, if we go back to the quote myth, you know, the legions of fallen angels that, if you will, work for him, and that in a biblical sense could support what you're saying about a boogeyman being more than one. They're sort of like the main dude, if you will, which we could call the Satan devil, and that his fallen angels are his helpers, his associates, his employees, whatever you want to call them, to help with spread these problems, whether they're in our waking life or they're in our dream life. And that's what I'm suggesting to you, is that that could be potential evidence to support what you're saying.
Perhaps. I do want to give everybody before we sign off, because I really have to pee. Before I give everybody a sign off here, I want to give you guys a bit of reassurance here. The Bible does say that hell, Sheol, the end, was not made for men, humans, men being humans, but for the devil and his angels.
Right.
Hell was not meant for us. So.
And as we wrap up on this topic of the boogeyman, and maybe that's going to be the final home for the boogeyman and all of his minions, based on what you're saying. So it's
Probably.
It's a very positive note.
Unless he's really good at bass, because I hear when you're good at bass, you have soul, and you're going to move up.
That could be. That very well could be. But
Look, guys, the fact is, if you're good to each other and good to other people, you may or may not beat the boogeyman. If you look, okay, like, this could have gone so much farther. Like, looking at, like, Candyman, that story.
Mm-hmm.
And projects, and the stories that go there, and what you tell each other around the campfire. I think the story is, don't be a cunt, and you'll be all right. What do you think, Terry? Is that a pretty good, legitimate? Like,
I think that's a nice, neat way to wrap it up. Yeah.
Don't be a butthead. How's that? Is that easier?
Or if we ended on a biblical note, do unto others as they undo to you.
Yeah. If I did unto others, they did to me, that would not work so well. Those poor bastards. But really, guys, care about each other. That's the thing. We're supposed to care about each other. Now, the boogeyman concept, the fright concept, there is something dark and sinister after you. Do not forget that. It's called death. And we are all on the path to that, none of us get out of it alive. Our lives are a fuse that burns out at some point. So what you do, the most important part of what you do is how you affect those around you, how you spark the other fuses and the other lives around you. That is where you shine, and that is where your spark matters. If you spark bad, we're going to remember you as...
The boogeyman.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, as you,
Manson, Casey, Michael Jackson, R. Kelly. He's not dead yet, but fucking should be.
Epstein.
Epstein, Jesus criminy. But the spark that you give...
Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein.
Oh, God, that guy too. Oh, sons of bitches. Anyway, point is, guys, you affect those around you. You want the boogeyman? You can be the boogeyman. You want to deplete the boogeyman? Just be cool. Just be nice to other people and care. Just care. That's a big step in the right direction to avoid the boogeyman. Anyway, I'm Jay, and I've been joined by...
I'm Terry.
Thank you for watching Vanishing Gates, and have good nightmares.